My name is Alara, and I am 32 years old. On the day of my cousin's funeral, his brother handed me a glass of champagne, and in that moment, as his fingers brushed mine, I saw the ghost of a triumphant smirk on his lips and knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I would one day destroy him. The air in my aunt's house was thick with the cloying scent of lilies and the stale, manufactured sorrow of people who barely knew my cousin Leo. He was gone, and this house, once the vibrant epicenter of my entire world, had become a museum of his absence. Every corner held a memory. Every photograph on the mantelpiece was a fresh stab of pain. The grand staircase we used to slide down on cushions was now just a silent, carpeted path for somber guests. The backyard where we staged epic water gun battles was empty, the lawn unnaturally pristine. And in the center of it all, holding court like a benevolent king accepting condolences for a fallen soldier, was Julian, Leo's older brother, my other cousin, my target. He was a masterpiece of performative grief. His eyes, a cool and distant blue, were reddened just enough to be convincing, a trick I'm sure he practiced in the mirror. He'd grasp a guest's shoulder, his voice a low, gravelly hum of shared loss. "Thank you for coming," he'd murmur. "It means the world." Leo, he loved life so much. He was a fraud, and I was the only one who seemed to notice. To everyone else, he was the grieving hero, the strong son holding his devastated mother, my Aunt Clara, together. He would guide her to a chair, fetch her a glass of water, his touch gentle, his expression one of profound filial devotion. I saw it for what it was, a performance for an audience, another stage where he was the star. To me, he was a murderer. Not in the legal sense. No, Julian was far too clever for that. The police report was clear. A single-car accident on a rain-slicked road. A tragedy. But Julian had supplied the car, the road, and the rain. He had spent years meticulously, methodically, poisoning Leo's soul, and I had watched him do it. Leo wasn't just my cousin. He was the other half of my heartbeat. Born only 6 weeks apart, we were less like family and more like two halves of a single entity fused together in the crucible of a shared childhood. Our houses were separated by a small stretch of woods that we claimed as our own kingdom, the Whispering Wilds. We spent our summers there, building elaborate forts from fallen branches and stolen tarps, convinced we were pioneering a new world. We had a secret language, a jumble of cliques and invented words that made our parents sigh with exasperated affection. He taught me how to climb the ancient oak tree in his backyard, the sentinel, his hands guiding my feet to the safest holds. I taught him how to read the stars, tracing constellations on his palm on warm August nights, giving them our own names. One evening, when we were 11, we lay on our backs on a trampoline, the canvas cool beneath us, watching a meteor shower paint fleeting silver streaks across the velvet sky. My home had been a battlefield that week, the air thick with the unspoken tensions of my parents' fracturing marriage. I hadn't said a word about it, but Leo knew. He always knew. He never pushed, never pried. He just reached over and took my hand, his grip small but firm. "It's always gonna be us, Alara," he said, his voice imbued with a profound seriousness only a child can muster. "When we're old and boring, with jobs and taxes and all that grown-up garbage, it's still us. I've got your back." And I believed him. It was the one unwavering truth in my young life. Me and Leo. Always. Julian was always on the periphery of our world, an entirely different species. 5 years older, He was polished where we were scuffed, calculated where we were spontaneous. He moved through life with an unnerving, reptilian grace. Our family, blinded by ambition, saw him as a prodigy. He excelled at everything he touched: school, sports, and later, the family's lucrative import-export business. He had our grandfather's shrewd mind and our father's easy charm, a combination that made adults swoon and made my skin crawl. He'd watch Leo and me from a distance, a small, unreadable smile on his face. He called us the twins, but the words felt less like a term of endearment and more like a label on a specimen jar. He would play with us sometimes, but his games were always about control. He'd organize a treasure hunt where the final clue, written in his perfect, looping script, led back to him, holding the prize he'd chosen. He would referee a race through the woods only to declare a tie, ensuring no one, especially not Leo, ever truly won. He bought Leo his first guitar, a beautiful acoustic that Leo cherished, but the gift came with strings attached. Julian would constantly ask, "Aren't you a rock star yet?" The question was framed as a joke, but it dripped with a subtle poison, planting the first seeds of the idea that Leo's passion was only valid if it resulted in fame and success. It was a constant, low-level hum of pressure, making Leo feel that his joy in just playing was somehow insufficient. The real divergence began in our late teens. I followed a predictable path, burying myself in books and earning a scholarship to a prestigious university. My future was a neat blueprint. Leo's was a wild, sprawling mural. He bled art. His heart beat in 4/4 time. He found his tribe in the city's gritty underground music scene. His fingers, once smudged with dirt from our forts, now calloused from guitar strings. He was brilliant, a raw, untamed talent. And Julian hated it. He hated it because he couldn't control it. He hated it because, for the first time, Leo had something that was entirely his own. This is when Julian's help began in earnest. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare, disguised as brotherly love. He offered to finance Leo's band's first demo recording, but the contract he drew up was a labyrinth of predatory clauses. I remember reading it, my stomach tightening. It gave Julian ownership of their music if they didn't secure a record deal with a major label within 6 months, an impossible timeline. When the deal inevitably fell through, Julian didn't gloat. He was worse. He was sympathetic. "Tough break, little brother," he'd said, patting Leo's shoulder at a family dinner. "The world is a cruel place for artists. Maybe it's time to think about something more stable." He was framing Leo's dream as a childish folly, and Leo, desperate for his family's approval, started to believe him. I tried to warn him. I saw what Julian was doing, the subtle ways he chipped away at Leo's confidence. "He's not helping you, Leo." I'd plead over the phone, my voice tight with a frustration he mistook for judgment. "He's managing your failure." Leo would get defensive. "You don't get it, Alara. You're not here. Julian believes in me. You just want me to be like you, to get a boring desk job and a 401k. The arguments grew more frequent, more bitter. Julian was a phantom presence on every call, a wedge he himself had expertly driven between us. He was isolating his prey. The last 2 years of Leo's life were a slow, agonizing descent. Julian arranged a job for him at a trendy art gallery, a position that seemed perfect. But the gallery was owned by one of Julian's business associates, and Leo was set up to fail. He was given impossible tasks. His creative ideas were stolen by his manager, and he was eventually fired for a mistake he didn't make. Julian was there to pick up the pieces, of course. Some people just aren't cut out for the 9-to-5 world, he'd said with a sigh, writing Leo a check that was just enough to make him feel both grateful and ashamed. He sabotaged Leo's relationships, whispering concerns into the ears of his girlfriends, painting Leo as unstable, a lost cause, a financial black hole. One by one, the lights in Leo's life went out, and Julian was always there, holding the extinguisher. Our last conversation was 3 days before he died. He called me, his voice a hollow echo of his former self. His band had finally broken up, the other members tired of the constant bad luck. He'd been evicted from his apartment. He was broken. "Maybe you were right all along," he whispered into the phone, and the sound of his surrender terrified me. I snapped. I screamed at him, not out of anger at him, but at my own powerlessness. I laid it all out, every piece of my suspicion about Julian, my voice raw with years of pent-up fear. "He's doing this to you, Leo. Can't you see? He's been doing this your whole life." But it was too late. The poison had done its work. Leo didn't yell back. He just laughed, a dry, empty sound that scraped against my ear. "You're just like him," he said, his voice flat and dead. "You both think I'm a failure. At least Julian pretends to care." And then he hung up. I tried calling back dozens of times. The calls went straight to voicemail. 3 days later, my aunt called me, her voice shattered into a million pieces. Leo was gone. A rainy night, a winding road. His car, a gift from Julian for his last birthday, had failed to take a turn. The days after his death were a blur of numb agony. At the funeral, I felt disembodied, watching myself go through the motions. That's when Julian approached me, that perfectly crafted mask of sorrow firmly in place. He handed me the flute of champagne. "A toast," he said softly, "to Leo. He wouldn't have wanted us to be sad." The sheer audacity of it, the sociopathic gall, sent a jolt of ice-cold clarity through my grief. As my fingers touched his, I looked into his eyes and saw it, a flicker of victory, a spark of smug satisfaction. He had won. He had erased the one person who ever made him feel second best. In that moment, the grief didn't vanish, but it crystallized. It hardened into something else. It became a purpose. The next day, an email arrived in my inbox. The sender was an unfamiliar, coded address. The subject line was a single word: always. My blood turned to ice. It was our word. I opened it. The body of the email was just as cryptic. "He blamed you, but not for the reason you think. Check the fort." I drove for 2 hours, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The woods of our childhood were darker, denser than I remembered. I found the ruins of our last fort, a collapsed skeleton of rotting branches and moss near the old sentinel oak. I dug where I knew he'd told me to, my fingers clawing at the damp earth beneath a loose stone in our makeshift hearth. My nails hit something hard. It was a small, waterproof box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a letter and a single USB drive. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. It was his handwriting, the familiar, messy scrawl that I knew better than my own. "Ilara," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And it means Julian thinks he got away with it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't listen to you. You were right about everything. He's been poisoning me for years, and I was too blind and too proud to see it. But my eyes are open now. It's too late for me, but it's not too late for the truth. This drive is everything. It's the start. He's a monster, Alara. Don't let him win. I've got your back. Always. Leo. I plugged the USB into my laptop right there in the woods. The screens glow ghostly in the twilight. It was a Pandora's box of Julian's deceit. Recorded phone calls where Julian bragged to a friend about the elegant way he was handling the Leo problem. Scanned copies of the fraudulent contracts with his manipulative clauses highlighted. Emails between Julian and the gallery owner conspiring to have Leo fired. It was a blueprint of his cruelty. Leo had known. In his final months, he had been fighting back in the only way he could, by gathering the evidence of his own destruction. And he had entrusted me to be his justice. My grief was replaced by a cold, diamond-hard resolve. Crying was a luxury I could no longer afford. My life now had a singular, all-consuming mission, to finish what Leo started. To not just expose Julian, but to dismantle him, piece by piece, using his own tools of patience and deception. I had to become a ghost. I played the part of the broken-hearted cousin, allowing my grief to bring me closer to Julian. I let him console me, let him put his arm around my shoulders, fighting the urge to recoil. "We only have each other now," he'd say, and I would nod, my eyes downcast, my heart a stone. "I know, Julian. Thank you for being so strong." I moved back home. I took a low-level accounting job at the family company, Harrison Global, a position so far beneath my qualifications that no one looked twice. Julian thought it was pathetic that I was adrift and seeking stability in the family fold. He was happy to have me under his thumb. I was invisible, and from the shadows I began my work. For 5 years, I lived a double life. By day I was quiet, mousy Alara from accounting, filing reports and fetching coffee. By night, I was Leo's avenger. I taught myself to code. I learned about forensic accounting. I used the information from Leo's USB drive as a Rosetta Stone to decipher Julian's empire of fraud. He was skimming millions from the company through a web of shell corporations and offshore accounts. He was blackmailing a board member. He was cooking the books to make his division look more profitable than it was, setting himself up for the CEO position he so desperately craved. I became his confidant. I listened to his problems, offering gentle, unassuming advice. I became his secret keeper, and he, in his monumental arrogance, fed me every piece of ammunition I would ever need. I never took anything for myself. I didn't want the money. I wanted to burn his kingdom to the ground. I spent years slowly, meticulously, building a fortress of evidence around him, each document a brick, each recorded conversation the mortar. The day finally came. The company was celebrating its 50th anniversary with a black tie gala. It was also the night the board was officially announcing my grandfather's retirement and naming Julian the new CEO. It was the absolute pinnacle of his life, the culmination of all his scheming. The ballroom was breathtaking, filled with industry titans, reporters, and the entire weight of our family's legacy. Julian was radiant, a conquering hero soaking in the adoration. I stood beside him on the receiving line, wearing a simple black dress, the picture of a loyal, supportive cousin. He leaned in, his breath smelling of expensive whiskey. "We did it, Alara," he whispered, squeezing my arm. "We finally made the family proud." Leo would have been proud. The urge to drive my heel through his foot was almost overwhelming, but I just smiled. A small, tight, secret smile. "Yes, he would have," I said. As the chairman of the board began his speech, building up to the grand announcement, I felt my phone vibrate in my clutch. I didn't need to look. It was a ghost I had set in motion years ago. At my quiet prompting, Julian had modernized the company's internal communications, linking everything to a central server and a guest list database for events like this. His own efficiency would be his undoing. The chairman's voice boomed. A man of vision, of integrity, it is my immense honor to introduce the new CEO of Harrison Global, Mr. Julian Harrison. The room erupted in applause. Julian stood up, buttoning his jacket, a dazzling smile plastered on his face. He looked at me, a final, triumphant glance. It was time. I walked calmly towards the stage, not to it, but past it, towards the exit. As I walked, I pulled out my phone. A few taps. Send. The email, containing a meticulously organized file of every piece of evidence I had gathered over 5 years, the financial fraud, the blackmail, the shell corporations, was sent simultaneously to every single person in that room, to a precompiled list of the top financial journalists in the world, and to the SEC's fraud division. But that wasn't the masterstroke. As Julian reached the podium, his smile faltering for a second as he saw me leaving, his own phone buzzed on the lectern. And so did every other phone in the room. A second email had just arrived. The sender, Leo Harrison. The subject, my last will and testament. I knew what it was. It was the final piece of the puzzle, a video file Leo had left on the drive with a note. Send this last. Let him see it. I had embedded the video directly into the email. As 100 people opened it, Julian, confused, tapped his own phone, and Leo's face filled the screen. He looked tired, his eyes haunted, but his voice was steady. It was a video diary, filmed the day he died. My brother, Julian, just left my apartment, Leo said, his image flickering on dozens of phones around the suddenly silent room. He knows that I know what he's been doing. He told me he would be ruined if it ever came out. He said he'd take care of it. He said I should be careful driving that new car he gave me. So, if you're watching this, it means he did. It means my death was not an accident. All the proof you need is... Leo looked directly into the camera, as if he was looking at me at all of them. It's wherever my sister, Alara, put it. He never thought she was strong enough. He was wrong. Julian stood frozen at the podium, his face a mask of horror as the sound of his own brother's voice, a ghost at the feast, echoed from every corner of the room. The applause had been replaced by a cacophony of gasps and frantic whispers. His world wasn't just collapsing. It was being erased. I didn't look back. I slipped out a side door into the cool night air, leaving him to be devoured by the truth. It's been a year. Julian is a pariah, ruined financially and socially, buried in lawsuits that will last the rest of his life. My family is shattered, forced to confront the monster they helped create. There was no joy in my victory, just a vast, quiet emptiness. The fire of vengeance that had kept me going for 5 years had burned out, leaving behind only the cold ashes of loss. I didn't do it for revenge. I see that now. Revenge is a hot, messy, selfish thing. This was colder. This was for him. It was to give Leo's story its ending, to give his truth a voice Julian had stolen from him. I sit by the ocean now and listen to the waves, and I think about our promise, made by 2 children under a shower of falling stars. I've got your back. Always. I kept my promise. Justice is a complicated word. Maybe this wasn't justice. Maybe it was just an ending. The only one we,